The Hillsborough disaster has been the subject of several investigations and indeed a statement in the House of Commons by the Home Secretary Theresa May at the time, and two inquests, one that happened 27 years after the fact. So the disaster and the attempted cover up have been well aired, and the circumstances around them have been well aired. But I'd just like to draw your attention to what happened in Hillsborough from a leadership point of view, and that is leadership at all ranks. Now, the same fixture occurred in 1988, a year previously. Liverpool played Nottingham Forest in a FA Cup semi-final, the exact same fixture, in the same ground in 1988. Liverpool were at that time as well allocated the West End, and those who approached the ground with standing terrace tickets approached it through the Leppings Lane entrance. The commander on duty would have had his observation post would have been at the Liverpool end, overlooking the pens with CCTV footage of Leppings Lane available to him. Now, in 1988, when the fans arrived at the top of Leppings Lane, they would have been met by a cordon of police officers who would have checked them for tickets. There were two purposes for this. It was to check that the fans trying to enter the ground had tickets, and also to slow down the progress of the supporters so that orderly queues would form outside the turnstiles at the end of the lane. Once through the turnstiles, the fans instinctively went down a tunnel into the awaiting pens, as they were called, for good reason. The tunnel under the stand would have given them access to pens 3 and 4. And once those pens were felt to be full by stewards and police, the entrance to them would have been blocked off, and fans who subsequently came through the turnstiles would have gone to the left or the right to other pens, standing only pens. And obviously it was a ticket only match, so that there was plenty of room for everybody. So this was the procedure in 1988, with the police commander at the Liverpool end having a bird's eye view of everything that was going on. In 1989, a new police commander had been on duty, he had only been promoted a fortnight earlier, and he would have had little or no experience of such a semi-final clash and the crowd control needed. However, you would imagine that many of the police officers on duty that day would have been veterans of previous games. You'd like to think a lot of them would have been experienced officers and would have known the ground very well, something the commander didn't know. But a lot of what happened in 1988 did not happen in 1989, and this caused the tragedy. There was no cordon of police at the top of Leppings Lane, and Leppings Lane quickly filled up and became dangerously full. A crush developed. So bad was and so dangerous was it that children were handed over the wall to policemen for their own safety. The television footage will show that the pens 3 and 4 access through the tunnel were full at about 2:30, and kick-off wasn't due until 3 o'clock. And they're probably dangerously full because there were people even at that stage climbing over the fences to get into pens on either side. So uncomfortable was the crush at that stage. But crucially, the entrance was never blocked to those pens. The police had lost control of the situation, and there were several requests to allow a gate to be open, gate C. It eventually was acceded to, and it was open. And when gate C was open, 1,000 or more fans got into the ground without having to go through the turnstiles. And this was a sensible move in one sense, in that it relieved the pressure on Eppings Lane. But of course, fans instinctively went down the tunnel because they could see the pitch through the tunnel, and it was a natural reaction to go down that tunnel. So that mass of humanity, added to an already dangerously full pens, caused the fatalities. It just, once they were set on that course, there was no turning back. Nobody knew at the back what was happening at the front. Barriers snapped, and people were crushed to death up against the pens. The ambulance response was woefully inadequate as well. Again, footage will show that the first responder was a voluntary ambulance, a St. John's ambulance, totally inadequate for what needed to be done. Where the evidence is that there were 42 ambulances eventually parked at or near the ground, but only 2 of those ever made it onto the pitch after the match was abandoned at 3 minutes. And while the police were forming a cordon across the centre of the pitch to avoid a non-existent threat of violence between the two sets of fans, the Liverpool fans were tearing down advertising hoarding from around the pitch in order to use as makeshift stretchers to carry away the injured and the dying. They were the only ones that showed leadership on that day. The Nottingham Forest supporters had no idea what was going on at any stage, because the public address wasn't used to advise them of what was happening, and they were chanting, expecting the game to start at any minute, not knowing what carnage was happening at the other end of the ground. So the obvious questions have been asked about police commanders and ambulance commanders and their culpability in all of this. But I would ask of the officers who were used to being on duty at these matches, why did they not take it on themselves to block off the entrance to pens 3 and 4 when they were full? Did they really need to receive orders to do what clearly needed to be done? Why did the officers not form the cordon as usual at the top of Eppings Lane? Why did the responders, the paramedics who knew that the necessity of getting to your injured party as quickly as possible to stabilise them, why did they not just bring their ambulances onto the pitch? What were they waiting for? Were they waiting for orders? And this is leadership at every level. So leadership is not a rank, it's a choice. And the wrong choices were made that day.